Welcome to the How to Work with Funders information video with the Big Lottery. I'd like to welcome Jonathan Clark, who is a Regional Manager with the Big Lottery Fund. Jonathan will be providing a brief outline of the Big Lottery Fund programme and answering questions which will help people who are new to the Big Lottery to understand how to work with them. Jonathan, could I start by asking you to give a brief outline of the Big Lottery and its programmes?
Yes, certainly, Jill. 28 pence of every pound that people spend on their lottery tickets goes to good causes. Sports, art and heritage get 20% each of that money, and we get 40%, which is why we're called the Big Lottery Fund. And that equates to hundreds of millions of pounds over the course of a year to actually invest. And our focus is on communities and the lives of people most in need. Okay, so that's where all of our funding goes. We have a range of different funding programmes, the most popular of which, and the ones which people will probably know, are our Awards for All programme, which funds up to £10,000, and our Reaching Communities programme, which will fund up to £500,000. Those are two of our open programmes, but there are a range of programmes that we deliver, and we're the largest non-statutory funder of the Voluntary Community Service.
Right, thank you. Can you tell me, first of all, what makes a successful bid?
Okay, well, we're an outcomes funder, so what we're interested in is the difference that your project will actually make. Okay, so when we're talking about that, what we're looking for is our projects that make a really clear difference. Okay, so we want to see very much how that you've identified your need and that your activities that you're actually going to carry out are actually going to lead to the outcomes. We like to see the difference that we're going to see in those people's lives. So we want to see a very clear link between your need, the activities and the outcomes of the project. So there's clarity there. And another thing is value for money as well. That's also something that we're obviously very keen on, particularly in the current times.
Yes, of course.
So basically what we would tell people is not to overcomplicate things. Okay, remember that the grant officer needs to be able to understand what you're intending to do, why you're intending to do it, and what difference it's actually going to make. Okay.
So following on from that, what are the key reasons why an application might fail?
Okay, the most common reasons are actually eligibility. So often organisations coming to us and asking us for something that we can't fund. So typically, for example, with Awards for All, we'll see applications coming in for sports, arts or heritage projects, which obviously we can't fund because our focus is on communities and the lives of people most in need. The flip side of that, of course, is that it's a competitive process. So we receive more applications than we can actually fund. So you've got to realise that you're actually in competition with other organisations and projects as well. And obviously we want to fund the best of those applications.
Right. What support can you offer a group, say at the early stages, when they're thinking about making an application to you? Do you suggest that they might be able to contact you at that stage just to get some general advice?
At the initial stage, I mean, I'm part of a very small regional team that's based over in Cambridge, so really the sort of face-to-face advice isn't really available, although we go out and we give presentations, etc. What I would say is that if you actually go online onto our website, there's full guidance information there. There are guidance notes for every programme, and what we found recently is that less than 40%, I think, of people that actually apply to us read those guidance notes, and I think that's one of the key reasons as well why people actually don't get funded. So there's lots of information there. There's a really useful some really useful online tools.
Yes.
And there's a publication there called Getting Funding and Planning Successful Projects, which we would recommend that people have a look at. We've also got a big advice line as well, which is an 0845 number, which is 0845 4102030. So if people want to ring and get and speak to somebody, they can do that through that medium. Or alternatively, as I say, we're a very small team based over in Cambridge. And we do go out, we give presentations and advice to people actually looking to apply into our programmes.
Yes, I had a look at your website and it is very comprehensive, very well set out, so I'd certainly advise people to look on your website for general information, not just about applying to the lottery, but in general. Do you provide general information on the likely number of grants that you're expecting to be able to make from any particular programme?
Yeah, when we launch a programme, we normally have information on exactly how much money we expect to spend and the approximate number of grants that we're expecting to make. So that information is normally available up front when a programme is launched. Or with rolling programmes like Reaching Communities or Awards for All, there would be an idea of how much budget there was that year and how many awards we would like to make.
Right. We always encourage groups to contact their funder if they're uncertain about criteria and just to get general advice concerning their application if they're at all uncertain. What information do you need to have a group ready to hand if they're phoning you for advice?
I think the most important thing is to be clear about your project and exactly what it is you're going to do and why you're going to do it. We speak to a lot of people who are interested in the funding, but they still haven't got a clear idea about why, what they would use the funding for. So I think that's very important. You're very clear about what you want to achieve when you actually come to us at that stage. The other point really is that I would say is to watch out for what we call sort of mission drift. So organisations that are trying to are chasing the funding. So if you might need money to fund your project, but don't change what you're doing to fit the criteria of the funder. It should be the other. You should be looking for funding that actually fits with your project, rather than changing what you're doing, because you may find out that you're not actually then going to have the outcomes that you were looking for the people you were looking to help.
Right. Do you think it would be helpful if we encourage peer mentoring and got groups to talk to each other about their experience of making funding applications to particular organisations?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good way to learn. And in some of the outreach activities that we've been doing, we've been talking about that recently, about bringing in somebody that's been through the process to actually help others through that. So I think peer mentoring is really important. And we're always really interested in how people find the process as well, because we'd like to feed that back in, because it's continually changing and developing the way that we deliver our funding as well, and we need that feedback too.
Can you also tell me at what stage in their development a group should be contacting you? And do you like them to have, for a new group, to have all their governance and everything in place before they contact you for that initial advice?
I think it's important that you've got the governance and everything in place. So definitely go and have a word with your local CVS. Make sure that you've got, your accounts, your governance and everything, because we simply won't be able to fund you unless you've got those things in place in the first place. As I said before, it's very important to have a very clear idea of what you're intending to do and why you're intending to do it. And the other thing I think I would say as well is to start small. If you're a new organisation, if you've not received grant funding before, please don't come in for £500,000, because it's quite unlikely that you're going to get that. We're going to want to see some form of track records. So my advice, I think, to new organisations would be very clear about what you intend to do, and start small. Okay, so get a track record, and then that will make you more likely to be funded in the future. So plan the development of your organisation.
So if someone's got a big project in mind, it's about breaking it down into small chunks and applying for funding, starting on the first phase of the project and building up that way. Yeah,
or potentially running a small pilot project to make sure that it works before coming in for something much larger. Okay, because obviously we want to know that the organisations that we fund can deliver. If your organisation's got a track record, that's going to look well when we assess the application.
Right. Do you encourage groups to feedback on their experience? Their initial contact with you and then any follow-up contact they have during the course of a project. Do you like to receive that sort of feedback on how groups have experienced the process?
Yeah, I think that's, as I said before, I think that's very important for us, that we're constantly refining the process through that level of feedback. Obviously, we don't deal with grant applications in Cambridge regionally. They're dealt with centrally in Birmingham and Newcastle, but we do feedback any information that we get from local applicants on their experiences centrally, and we do get listened to.
And I think you were saying about the fact that the main office is in Newcastle, and I think this is something for people to understand, that you may know Suffolk, but when they're putting in an application, it's really important that they describe where they are and their environment, because someone up in the north of England is not going to understand the issues for Suffolk. So that's part of that clarity that you're looking for in an application.
Exactly. I mean, it's a grant officer up in Newcastle. They've got a set amount of time to assess your application. That's where the clarity of what you're looking to do comes in. But be aware, they're not going to know anything about the local area or about the local issues, except what you put on that on that application. So be sure, don't assume anything. I think that's the important thing.
Right. And obviously feedback is really important for organisations. If they have an unsuccessful application, you know, they need to know how to improve on that in the future. So what sort of level and type of feedback can you offer?
Okay, well, as I said, we don't deal with the applications within the region, so we don't really provide face-to-face feedback. But you will be able to have, you will receive a letter if your application gets turned down. You receive a letter giving you the general reasons why the application turned down, what you should be looking to work on, etc. And there's always the option as well of actually telephoning and actually speaking to the grants officer that dealt with your application as well. So it's important to remember there's that option as well. So I would advise anybody that gets turned down to get as much information as possible on the reasons why, and then to look back and review their project in that light.
No, that's really helpful. And do you direct groups to other sources of funding?
We've actually started working quite closely with other funders now, so we do share information on the awards that we make, and we try to understand what other funders are trying to fund as well, particularly in the difficult sort of challenging times that we're in at the moment. So yes, if we're aware of another fund that's more appropriate, we will direct people to that particular funder. Or alternatively, what I would always tell people to do is to speak to the local community and voluntary service organisation and actually carry out a funding search to make sure that you're going for the most appropriate funding for your organisation.
Yeah. And obviously that's something that our funding advisors offer as a funding surgery, where people can get that sort of wider advice on applying for funds. So after you have made a grant to an organisation, what sort of support do you offer?
Okay, well, it really sort of depends, I think, on the size of the grants. There's larger grants would have their own dedicated sort of grants officer that will look after the grant. But there is always the option of telephone support from the office in Birmingham or Newcastle that's handling the application, that's handling the project funding. Our capacity within the region is quite limited, although we can offer advice and support in sort of promoting the projects as well, so we can do some of that communication side of things. And there's also, again, on the website, there's also a wealth of support there and advice for organisations what to do when they receive project funding.
Right. And if an organisation should find that they're experiencing difficulties in delivering the project for whatever reason, what would be your advice to them?
Well, my advice would be, it's not the end of the world. You know, the grants officer is approachable. Okay, we understand that things change throughout the life of projects, and that things don't always work out exactly how people plan them to work out through the life of the project. So the important thing, I think, is to speak to the grants officer very early, to talk about the issues, why those issues are happening, maybe to agree new outcomes for the particular project, but have that conversation rather than letting it get to a sort of critical point further down the line.
Yeah. And what do you require from a group during the period of the grant and at the end of the grant? Are you looking for reports during the grant period?
Okay, well, during the grant period, the larger grants that we deliver, the Reaching Communities grants, for example, they require regular monitoring, so there'll be regular contact between the organisation and the grants officer looking at the progress of the project, how that's developing and moving towards the outcomes that have been agreed. Because it's almost a contract, actually. The application, the grant funding is a contract between you, your organisation and us, It's about taking those people, those beneficiaries that you've identified from one place to another, and obviously there's a monitoring of the development of the project through that process. For smaller grants, for example, like Awards for All, there would probably just be an end of grant monitoring form. There may be some contact along the way, but again, it's just about seeing that you've delivered what you said that you would deliver. So we do keep a careful eye on it. Of course, it's public money at the end of the day. Just be aware of that, and we want to see that you've actually been successful and delivered what you said you could deliver in the application.
Right. I think that covers the main questions that I wanted to ask you, Jonathan. Are there any other comments you'd like to make, any final sort of summary that you'd like to add?
I think just to be aware, if you're going for the larger funding, particularly the Reaching Communities funding, that we've now moved away from smart outcomes, which I think were confusing a lot of people and organisations. Those were the SMART being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound, and it all got quite confusing. We've tried to change that. So whilst we've still got those elements in there, we're now looking particularly for indicators, which are effectively the milestones to show that the change, the difference that you said your project was going to make is actually happening, and also timescales as well, to show how things are happening at certain periods throughout the life of the grant. So you need to think very carefully about how you know, or you will know, that you're making a difference, and how that can be evidenced to us as well, particularly with the bigger grants. I think that's important to remember.
Right. Jonathan, we've got a short video prepared by the Suffolk Foundation about funding social enterprises. And I wondered if there was anything additional you wanted to add about the Big Lottery Fund in terms of social enterprises.
Okay. Well, we do fund a range of social enterprises, and social enterprises are a very varied kind of area that's still developing, I think, at the moment. But I think one important point to make is that we fund outcomes and not organisations. Yes. So that's the fundamental thing to remember. That what we're interested in is the difference that the project will make, not who's actually going to be delivering it. So we will fund social enterprises the same as we would a voluntary and community sector organisation. One of the issues, I suppose, is the problems of, for example, voluntary sector organisations presenting themselves in a business-like manner, being investment ready. I think that's something we're particularly seeing, is organisations trying to move away from that grant-dependent culture to a more social business kind of area. It's something they find quite difficult. And similarly, businesses or organisations that are set up as social businesses actually then coming into our funding and recognising that what we're actually after is what we're interested in is a difference. It's not actually the way the business will actually operate, it's actually the difference they're going to make. So it's quite interesting comparing and contrasting the different sectors. And it's important for us. I think it's don't lose sight of why you're doing something and what difference you're intending to make.
Yeah, this was something that I discussed with Sue from the foundation, the fact that you need that balance. It's not just about business skills, but it's about your empathy for community needs as well. In the video that Sue from the Suffolk Foundation provided for us, she did give some guidance on the governance procedures that you'd expect a group to have in place if they're seeking funding as a social enterprise. Is there anything that you would like to emphasise that you would expect to see in place?
Okay, for all of our funding, we expect organisations to have at least 3 unrelated people on their management committee. So when we're talking about social enterprises, that would actually be directors. So we would expect to see at least 3 unrelated directors, and that's a big reason why a number of applications from CICs and other social enterprises have been knocked back, actually. So that's an important point to remember.
Right.
And another important point would be that you actually have a bank account in the name of your organisation. We won't be able to fund any organisation, for example, using private bank accounts.
Right.
So it would have to be in the name of the organisation. And that's very important across all of our funding, that everything links up, so the constitution of your organisation, the bank account, the name that the application comes in under, all of these things need to match.
And would you just like to mention something about your social investment programme?
Okay, well, we're moving into looking very carefully at social investment now. Because obviously sustainability is a big issue for us. We can't just continue to keep funding the same projects over and over again. We're interested in different ways of sustaining projects and maintaining those differences going forward. So we've got a couple of social investment programs at the moment. There's one called Next Steps, which has recently been opened, which is £6 million investment in social investment vehicles in ways of delivering social investment. And we also handled the Big Society Investment Fund on behalf of the government, which is the forerunner of the Big Society Capital, which will come online in the new year.
Lovely. I think that's everything that I would like to ask you today, Jonathan. Can I just thank you very much for doing this video with us? I think there's a lot of really useful information in there, and I'd just like to reiterate how good your website is for general information and specific information, and that people need to read those guidelines and criteria. Okay, I'd just like to remind people that on the Suffolk Funding website we do have a contacts page where you can find out who is your nearest and most appropriate funding advisor, and they'll be able to provide extra support and help with your funding applications.